Any good stories about Francesa? I've always wondered, what's he like? I mean, because obviously towards the end of his career, he sounded like a little
His career's not
salty.
over. I think the thing with Mike is, look, there was a time, I told you this, when you'd be in Mike's car, and back then the phones were connected in the car, you know.
It's a good story.
And phone ring would be Bill Parcells. Or the phone ring would be Omar Minaya. Like, there was nobody in the sports world. Francesa was hooked in. Mm-hmm. So when he went on the air with Dog and said, Dog, I spoke to Parcells, he did.
Welcome back to another episode of 77 WABC Sports Live. I'm your host, Mike Didino. I have Sid Rosenberg to my right and James Flippin to my left. Another day, another episode. I'm going to jump right into it today. We're going to get to the Knicks, who win another thriller last night. Not without fireworks, though. Sid, what's your take on the game from last night?
Well, it was fun to watch, and I guess reminiscent of Willis Reed. The crowd last night at Madison Square Garden gave Jalen Brunson a very similar reception to the one that Willis got. Of course, he started the game, injured Game 7 back in '69, and Jalen got hurt midway through the game. But, you know, he toughed it out. He gave him another big effort. Obviously, the Knicks, you're seeing this. Brunson's had 40-point games the whole playoffs. But there's two or three other guys that you can really count on at this point. And Hart, of course, is one of those guys. But Anunoby. That trade right before New Year's, how big was that last night? He was tremendous. Great defensive player, covering guys twice his height. Of course, a big night, too, for DiVincenzo. And how about Hartenstein? He was 14 points in the box score. But do you know the Knicks last night, with Hartenstein on the court, plus 21. That means when he was out there, the Knicks outscored the Pacers by 21 points. So the idea that Jalen Brunson is the whole team, he's a lot of it, don't get me wrong. And if he ever gets really hurt and can't play, they can't win. They can't win. But he's got some very important pieces, and they all came through last night.
To James, Brunson obviously leaves the game early with a foot injury. He then comes back after halftime. Any initial reaction from you? Because I always get a good laugh out of you when
100%, and I'll give it to you right now. First of all, Hartenstein just missed a triple-double, so I mean he was just absolutely all over the place yesterday. But as far as Brunson, I'll be the first to admit that if he first went, he got banged up because he got hit in the junk early. And he was kind of, recovering, and then he had a false step where he hurt his foot. Nobody knew it at the time. When he was out for that entire second quarter and the Pacers went on that run, I'm not embarrassed to say, I said, if he doesn't play the second half, I'm not watching. I'm not watching the game. Because, I mean, it's going to be so depressing with all this team has gone through, the Randall injury, the fact that OG got hurt, came back, then he got hurt again, and obviously OG got hurt later in the game. It was just a really... just where do we go from here type thing. Here we go again with Brunson potentially being hurt. But, yeah, the way that the game ended and the fact that the team toughed it out like that, I just want to say very embarrassing that Rick Carlisle would suggest that, a small market team can't win. Because, I mean, the calls were, going both ways, and, there were some controversial ones. Whatever. It happens in every basketball game.
I mean, look, Rick is a great coach, and Rick has won an NBA championship. That's the bottom line in Dallas. He knows what he's doing. And he's right, Indiana is a small market team compared to the Knickerbockers. But when you talk about tradition, especially the last 20 or 30 years, the Pacers are right there with anybody. Those teams with Rick Smits and Chris Mullin and Mark Jackson and the Davis brothers and all those guys, very good basketball teams. So I'm not giving it to him. You're right. I think last night that was a desperation move out of Rick Carlisle. I don't feel like a lot of the teams that are in smaller markets in the NBA suffer because of that. Look at Oklahoma City. They're doing pretty good these days, right? The Denver Nuggets, the last couple of years, major market Denver, but not necessarily a big basketball city.
And there's an upside to being a small market team. Like the Thunder tanked for several years. Nobody cared.
Nobody cared. Exactly.
And they got Chet Holmgren as a result. So
yeah, I'm with you. I think Rick is upset.
Carlisle, as we like to call him, Crying Carlisle. That's one of the things we say.
Is that supposed to be a Donald Trump impression? I'm not entirely sure what you were doing there. You did have the hand motions down like Trump, though. You did have the Game 1 call, and just to go off the Carlisle comments, because yesterday, I mean, back and forth game. I didn't think there were any blatant calls that went against Indiana.
You lost
what about
Brunson
the Game 1
for
call?
a whole quarter.
No,
a whole quarter, and then you cry.
The Game 1 call, though, they called the moving pick when the Pacers had a chance to win the game. I thought that was one of the worst calls I could really remember in a playoff game. And if that was called against the Knicks in MSG, the refs would not have left the arena alive. So is it just the home court advantage? Does the NBA actually want the Knicks to advance?
The ball was clearly dribbled off the Pacers' player's foot in a full court press situation. The Knicks had to challenge
and then they
that.
lose their timeout, and you don't get the timeout back, which
So,
is
I mean, the calls go
flabbergasting
both
stuff.
ways. The calls are bad all the time. It's basketball.
This is one of the reasons I say this every week. You notice this.
is what he
that I
says.
don't do sports
He
talk
always says
anymore.
Makes you
I
sick.
believe that at the end of the day, the calls will even out.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many Monday mornings I started with that holding call cost the Giants the game. That holding call cost the Jets the game.
Well, they were right, though, that time. They were right.
Yeah, please. It's. I mean, I'm talking to my friend Pete Morgan, game 1, and he's going crazy about Wes McCauley. 90% of the folks in this town don't even know who the hell Wes McCauley is. So I refuse. Now, look, if somebody gets punched across the face and they're laying there bleeding and there's no call, that's one thing. But when guys start blaming refs or umpires, that's where you lose me. That is WFAN to the T. That's why I don't do it anymore. I believe the calls eventually even out, and the better team always wins. It's not about the referees, except when my guy was repping and he was getting paid by the mob.
Yeah, right, Tim Donaghy. Yeah, people forget about that.
Back to you. OG Anunoby, he left the game, hamstring injury. Seems like that guy's hurt. But the great Phil Dixon says he's never heard. I'm not really sure how that even came about.
Absolutely stunning that he ever said that.
OG Anunoby hurts his hamstring. He was immediately ruled out. If I was a betting man, I would bet that he probably misses the rest of the series. If he does, you have Anunoby out, you have Randall out, you have Mitchell Robinson out, you have Brunson, who's clearly not 100%. Should the Knicks still be the favorites to win the series?
I mean, look, at this point, obviously, they're 2 games up. They took care of business with home court and all that. Whatever happens, if OG can't come back at all, then it definitely tilts the balance a little bit, because you saw what happened with Siakam basically after OG came out. He was just scoring on every single play at will. And the height advantage there is a factor. So, you got to take that into account. But no, I think that the Knicks at this point are sort of more than the sum of their parts. You know what I mean? There's something about this team, their character, the intensity with which they D up and go after the offensive glass late in games.
Hoops.
Yeah, it's, they're going to have to figure out a way to make it happen. But clearly, the short rotation that they have and the fact that that's so opposite what the Pacers look to do, it does kind of lead to some transition opportunities for Indiana, and that's just going to continue to happen.
I mean, if you told me the series was starting tonight, no OG. Randall's been out for months. It's
Brunson
it's a
banged
waste.
up with the foot.
Right. Now, if you told me the series was starting tonight, I'd say, whoa. Maybe I'll go with Charles Barkley, who hates the Knicks. But they're up 2-0. That's the bottom line. So now Indiana's got to win 4 out of 5. The Knicks probably have enough to make sure that doesn't happen. But if they don't get healthy, then the idea of beating Boston, which right now is far-fetched, that is far-fetched. If they don't get healthy, there's no chance they can beat the Celtics. So series starts tonight. I'm nervous, up 2-0. I feel better. But for Boston, you need a healthy Knicks squad.
And I thrive off negativity, so this is perfect for me now to kind of transit. Like you mentioned, the Knicks have no chance to be the Celtics. So why are people around the city, and I guess it's just because it's Knicks basketball, so excited about this Knicks team, despite them having no chance to win an NBA title?
I'll
They
give you
have
the answer.
no chance.
I'll give you the answer, okay? If they move on and they play Boston, there's only 2 teams left. You're one of 2 teams.
But you're going to get swept.
Well, listen, that's what I think, but guess what? We thought the Yankees were going to lose to the Red Sox back when Rivera was on the mound. Well, there was no way the Marlins were going to beat the Yankees. We thought the Bills were going to beat the Giants in the Super Bowl. We thought that Georgetown couldn't lose to Villanova. Point being, NC State, when you get there to that point where you're one of 2 teams left, not anything can happen. The better team usually wins. But guess what? There's only one other team now that can win it. You're that team. So you should be that excited. You should be, wow, look at this. We have an opportunity to win 4 games and be in the NBA Finals. They're the only other team that has that besides Boston. That is worthy of the excitement.
Yeah, and also it's just the way the NBA works to an extent. It's important because all these players, these free agents, these big-time guys who kind of pick where they go via trade or free agency or whatever it may be, they're going to be more interested in coming to the Knicks if it's like, oh, they're just on the cusp of potentially doing something really, really special in New York. They go to the conference finals, they lose to the Celtics, the whole thing. Maybe it goes 5-6 games. We'll have to see. But
Would that be a win for the Knicks if they lost to the Celtics in 5-6 games? Would that be
6 games for sure. But, to Jimmy's point, there was a long time here, long time, where the Knicks could not draw free agents. I was talking to UB Brown once on my FAN show, and he said, Sid, why would they want to come? The weather 6 months a year here is terrible. The taxes are outlandish. The crime is no good. I mean, New York City, if you're watching this from outside New York City, this is a bad time for this city. We got pro-Palestinian marches every day. Taxes are through the roof. Crime is still a major issue. And so it's not a great destination. But the one thing you can't argue, Michael Jordan said this best, Madison Square Garden is the Mecca.
Yeah.
Players come here, they play in there, they want to be here. So it's difficult because New York, you have to play. People live here. It's not just going to play basketball. Do they want all that other nonsense that New York is presenting right now to have a chance to win at the Garden? And the answer, I think, finally is yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's to me the whole key is that you're continuing to try to sell the narrative of the Knicks are back, making a comeback. The fact that the town loves them as much as they do, that there's so much of a buzz, that there's so much talk about the Knicks. That's what the players are going to have to want to come and deal with the cost of living and deal with the trappings of New York and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, the weather stinks. They'd rather be in Miami. They'd rather be in L.A.
No, there's also no state tax in Miami. But you just said it. The Knicks are back. Mayor Eric Adams says almost every day, by the way, he's in Rome. He says almost every day, New York is back. New York is not back. But the New York Knicks, I sound like Stephen A. Smith, the New York Knicks, they're back.
Let's move along to the other team that is not back. They've always been good, at least since I've been around. The New York Rangers commanding 2-0 series lead, a thriller on what was it? I'm all out of whack. Tuesday night, they won in double overtime. Rangers now the favorite to win the Stanley Cup. But they'll have a big game tonight. They'll go to Carolina. They're big underdogs. Hurricanes playing for pretty much their season. What do you expect tonight?
Raleigh's a very tough place to play. And it's not like the Rangers have come out and beaten Carolina 5-0 these first two games. Both nail-biters. Game one, we had a 2-goal lead, and they're about to get a 6-on-4 to tie the game.
They were going to blow it.
Me too. Game two, they played for 4 hours. You know, it's over at midnight, 12:30. So Raleigh's a much different story. Now, look, I've got tickets for Game 5 Monday night.
Wow.
And I've had tickets for Game 5 since the beginning of the series, so I'm rooting for a Carolina win. Would it surprise me if they come back to New York 2-2? No, but keep this in mind. Of all these playoff matches we're talking about, the only team, NBA and NHL, to remain undefeated this postseason is the Rangers. They swept the Capitals. They're up 2-0 on Carolina. I don't expect that to continue tonight, but for what it's worth, the Rangers are 6-0. Their power play is the best I've ever seen. I saw Gretzky and Messier with the Oilers. I saw Bossy and Trottier with the Islanders. I've seen all these great teams. I've never seen a group that scores almost every time against a very good penalty kill with Carolina. So they're 6-0. Their special teams are outrageous, but Raleigh is a tough place to play. They will be playing again at Madison Square Garden Monday night.
Well, quickly to you, because I know that you're a big hockey fan, so we'll get to your take after. Back to you. Best power play you've ever seen.
Right up there.
Why do you think that is? Because they've obviously had a good power play over the last 2-3 seasons, but this year it seems like it's kind of take that next step despite them having pretty much the same roster. Is it coaching? Is it just another year together, more experience? Why do you think they've taken that next step?
I think it's all of it. I think certainly you got to give Laviolette credit, and he's got the guys in the right place at the right time. But here's what you want for a great power play. You want a good puck handler. They've got 2 of them, Panarin and Fox. And Zibanejad, they've got 3 of them. Then you want a guy who can shoot from any place on the ice. Again, Panarin, Zibanejad. And then, most important of all on your power play, you want a guy that's going to stand in that crease and get to every loose puck for the easy goal. That's Chris Kreider. He's the best I've ever seen at that. So they've got puck handlers, they've got sharpshooters, and they've got the guy in the crease that'll score off every rebound. That's Chris Kreider. Those 5 guys they put on the ice, the perfect combination of skill for a great power play.
And I know you're a diehard Rangers fan.
By the way, that's a great break. Steve Larroquette can't do better than that. Trust me.
That's true.
And that's why they call him the Sid Rosen. Now, we'll get to you shortly. We know you're a diehard Rangers fan, so we'll definitely get your take on this shortly. Back to Sid, one more Rangers question for you. Did you see the Tony D'Angelo hot mic with Keandre Miller?
I did.
Any take on that? I mean, Tony obviously put in the Rangers. I didn't personally like him on the team. Obviously, he got cut. It ended up bad. But at one point, he was like a top 4 defenseman, played in the power play. He was pretty beloved in New York City. Obviously, he fell off a cliff, and now he's booed every time he touches the puck. Anything on Tony D?
Well, he likes that. I mean, if
He
you
loves it, man.
you come back to New York, you want them to pay attention. So they're booing him. So he goes, "Hey, look, they hate me."
Because this guy's not even a starter if they're fully healthy.
No, but I liked him a lot on the Rangers. I don't hold it against him now. He's on the opposing team, and it's a very ugly series. And, you got guys on the Rangers. I'll tell you, Trocheck, who scored the game-winning goal last game, he's looking to fight every time he's on the ice. I love him.
I love him.
Rempe, all he does is fight for his 4 or 5 minutes that he's out there. So this is a very different Ranger team. Ron Duguay was on with me 2 days ago on my radio show. He said, "Sid, I told you last year we were too soft." He did say that. He's right.
And they were too soft.
They were. Now, between Rempe and Trocheck and, of course, Trouba will punch you right across the face. It's a different team. So, they start two of the Rangers. So, D'Angelo is one of those hotheads. That's why he's out of here, by the way. You know that. So, I got no issue with Tony D'Angelo. I mean, he is what he is. He's a second-rate defenseman on a good hockey team back in New York having some fun. That's all.
Yeah, Tony D'Angelo, don't see me in the streets because I will fight you. We'll get to you in a minute.
He'll kick your ass, Mike. I got to be honest with you.
You think so?
I think so.
No, I got some scrap in me.
No, I see it.
These skinny ass. What are you talking about? Look at you.
Oh, sorry.
Look at you.
Oh.
What are you waving at?
Let me just note, by the way, that I like to pay attention to what people are saying about the Rangers, and I read some article, I think it was in the Post, that was talking about the way they're practicing right now.
Oh, wow.
And saying that the level of intensity, even for a team that's kind of in between off days for making a run in the playoffs, is at a different level. So when you talk about they were too soft last year, whatever, kind of interesting to couple that with
that's
supposedly
important
the way
because
they're
that goes
practicing.
back to Laviolette, the coach. That's an important point.
He's done a great job.
Because if you're right and they're practicing as if they're playing, and that's the coaching that's doing that, that's a big deal.
Right.
So if the Rangers do have great success this year, you can say, hey, Laviolette really made a difference. These guys showed up at the early skate at 10 o'clock in the morning like they would at 7 o'clock at night. That's a very important point, actually.
And Tony D'Angelo, I got your back.
You got his back?
I got his
I'll tell
back.
you what's fun to watch is Boston, Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Because Florida was an overwhelming favorite, and Boston killed them game one, and Florida came back last night and blew them out. I still think the Panthers will be in the Eastern Conference Finals. Vinny Viola's one of my best friends. He owns the team. But that was a shocking game one win for Boston.
Well, then Florida comes back. They smoke him last night. And Pasternak, who's Boston's best player, fights Kachuk on Florida. Pretty much the best players in the team fighting. It's almost as if like Panarin were to fight for the Rangers, and it was a dogfight.
Yeah.
That series is interesting. I think the Rangers, honestly, are better than both of those teams. Last question about the Rangers before we move on. Not really about the Rangers, but were you watching the game when the broadcast cut out in the last minute of the game when the Rangers were on the power play? Cut to the
game two.
Yeah.
Yes.
How does that happen?
I don't know.
How is ESPN such a damn joke?
I don't know. And look at
and they want hockey to get big, and then you're cutting out with 30 seconds left?
That's a bad job. I mean, you got Steve Levy, you got Mark Messier, you got P.K. Subban, you got McDonough doing the games, you got all this talent in and around you doing hockey, and for the most part, they've done a great job with hockey. No one else has a very good job with hockey, MSG, SNY, but to have that type of issue during a major playoff game in overtime, that's a bad job.
It's hilarious. I just picture like some guy like in the control room with the wrong remote being like, I just want to check out the start of the Stars game real quick. That's all good. I just want to see. What are you doing?
That'll be one of those times for me. I'll never forget like what I was doing. And the last thing on hockey, and then we'll move on. McDonough, who announces the games, I think he's terrible. I miss Doc Emmerich. You remember the Doc?
I like Doc very well. I'm friendly with Doc Emmerich.
Are you? What's he up to
Very
these
friendly.
days? Can you tell him I miss him?
He's living large. I will tell him that. I don't miss Doc for these games. I miss Sam Rosen. I want my guy. I'm a Ranger fan. I want my guy. But if I'm a Met fan and they're playing in a big game, I want Gary Cohen. And I wanted John Sterling, but he's gone now, so I'll take Michael Kay.
It's the worst part about the playoffs, the fact that they have a national
you lose
call.
your
It
guys.
sucks.
Exactly right. That's why.
Well, it's a perfect time as you bring up Gary Cohen. Speaking of overrated announcers, we'll get into baseball now. I'm not a Gary Cohen fan, and I know this is a hot take, and I know
you're nuts. He's the best in the business.
You're begging him to stop, right?
I'm begging you to stop.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm begging you to stop.
He's just too much of a homer for me, and he tries to just color for the game. Yet he probably still couldn't play at a little league level, and he acts as if he's like some big knowledgeable guru, and all he is just a rat. No, I can't stand him. I really can't stand him.
He's great. He may be the best in the business. He may be the best.
Keith's my cup of tea. It's a guy that knows the game.
Keith is an analyst. He doesn't do the same thing. Keith is not calling the balls
That's the problem.
and strikes.
Cohen tries to be an analyst, yet he doesn't know what he's talking about.
Yes, he does. Yes,
he hasn't played baseball above little league level.
I remember, it's funny you say that. I remember I was doing my show in Florida with O.J. McDuffie, wide receiver for the Dolphins, and A-Rod called in. And midway through the A-Rod conversation, A-Rod is texting me and he says, Mike Francesa wants to call in. This is years ago. It's not in Miami. So Mike calls in. Long story short, there's some argument in sports, and OJ and Francesa start going back and forth. And OJ did what you just did. He said, wait a second, man. I was out there every week with one tray. That's what he called Dan Marino, number 13, one tray. I was out there every week with one tray. I was getting hit. When did you play ball? You know, Mike Francesa is probably the number one rated sports talkie in the history of our business. Mm-hmm. And I remember sitting there going, I agree with Mike Francesa. You don't have to play the game to know the game. I never played professional sports. I could sit with anybody, even Michael Jordan, and talk about basketball. So I disagree with you. First of all, Cohen is great. He paints an unbelievable picture. If he's a TV guy who does a radio broadcast.
He's
That's
actually
special.
He's wasted on the TV.
He's wasted.
I miss him on the radio.
Right, and he's look, Keith is good and Darling is good, and the three of them make a really good team. But don't confuse the issue. The talent there ain't Keith and Ron. It's Gary.
Yeah, and I mean, and don't get me wrong, I love Gary, Keith, and Ron, just like every other Mets fan. But
I don't.
You know, Keith,
I'm a Mets fan. So
Keith
not every
is
other
all right.
Mets
Fine,
fan.
not everyone. Keith is way too pro hitter most of the time. He loves to bring everything back to his career. He loves the Cardinals. You know, like the whole thing's kind of annoying. Ron with his leftist politics and stuff, it's enough. So you know they've got their issues that you can take with all of them. But come on, how could you not love that broadcast team?
I love
it's a
Gary.
great broadcast
Yeah, I think
team.
he's great.
I mean, the Yankees broadcast team, prime Yankees broadcast team with Sterling and those boys was probably a little better, but
Well, Sterling did the radio side with Susan.
Yeah,
of course,
well,
Michael
radio
Kay's
versus
the
TV.
And now you're bringing
TV
Howie
guy.
Rose into the story. So,
Yeah,
I mean, come on.
yeah.
What are we doing here?
what are we doing? What do you
I
mean?
don't know.
What are we doing here?
You think Rose is good too?
Absolutely. Howie Rose is one of the greats.
Absolutely. I mean, his Met games are great, and of course, he
Maybe
still
I'm
has
just
one of
too
the
young
most
to appreciate
one of the most
greatness.
famous calls of all time, Matteau. I actually spoke to Stepan Matteau on Tuesday through Ron Duguay, but Rose, you are too young.
We tried to tell him before about 94. We
Right.
tried to explain to him
It's
what
true, you're
happened
too
in
young.
94. He wasn't there.
Because the young guy, look, I like Ryan Ruocco, he's pretty good, but the younger guys today are not nearly as good. When I grew up, I had Bob Murphy with the Mets, Lindsey Nelson, Ralph Kiner. You had the great Bill White Yankee teams. You got Gary Cohen. You had guys like Vince Scully, Johnny Most, Marv Albert. You have no one, and Mike Breen is still great, but you don't have any of that anymore. You just don't. So, I know I sound like an old guy. When I was around, it was better. But the truth is, if you don't think Gary Cohen is good, you're either young or stupid, and I know you're not stupid. So you must be young.
Stupid.
And also, you didn't even get to experience the best football team of all time with Summerall Madden.
Oh,
so,
the best.
It's a shame
the
that
best.
you missed out
By
on
the way,
that.
I would argue that Gifford, Howard Cosell, and Don Meredith were even better.
See, that's fair. That's going a little bit before
Well,
my
I'm
time.
old.
Dude,
I'm
this
old.
is a new. All this stuff's a new language to me. I don't
Even
even know
Marty
those are names.
Glickman out of Madison High School. Those were the greats.
You brought up Mike Francesa. I was a big Francesa fan growing up. That's one guy that I would listen to a ton on the radio. Any good stories about Francesa? I've always wondered, what's he like? I mean, because obviously towards the end of his career, he's sounding got a little.
His career's not
salty.
over. He has a very popular podcast.
He has a podcast still,
He
but
does
as a
very well.
host, he's done for the most part.
I mean, he's not on radio anymore, right? And Chris is still doing his thing. But I think the thing with Mike is, look, there was a time, I told you this, when you'd be in Mike's car, and back then the phones were connected in the car,
It's a good story.
And phone ring would be Bill Parcells. Or the phone ring would be Omar Minaya. Like, there was nobody in the sports world. I don't care, ESPN. Back then, it was still the infancy stages of all the national stuff. Francesa was hooked in. Mm-hmm. So when he went on the air with Dog and said, Dog, I spoke to Parcells, he did. He did. And he knows this stuff. But for a guy that is commonly described as kind of cantankerous, not very nice, almost like an Amish Jr., I'll tell you one story. So many years ago, my partner, Joe Beningo, had a fire in his house in New Jersey, and it destroyed everything. In fact, his cats died, and Joe loves his cats. It was very, very sad. It really was. He lost everything. And Joe wasn't making $1 million at the time. Mike was, more than $1 million. And Beningo came to work the next day at WFAN, and Mike walked up to him and handed him an envelope. And he said, take this. And Joe said, okay, great. And Joe walked to the back, looked inside the envelope. It was $5,000 in cash. And Beningo walked back to Mike, and he said, Mike, that's very nice, but I can't pay you back. And Mike said, did I ask you to pay me back? Did I say pay me back? Mike gave him the money. When Imus had all those radiothons for kids with cancer and all those days at Hackensack in New Jersey, Francesa was always there and always one of the highest donations. So, he could be cantankerous and nasty, and a lot of folks don't like him. Mm-hmm. And believe me, he could be a real pain in the ass. I had my days where I couldn't stand Mike. But there's an inner Mike Francesa that is about as charitable and nice as anybody I've ever met. Most of you don't know that. I just told you.
That reminds me, you still owe me some money, so I'll just pay me back before I come up to you and beat your knees and tell you motherfucker.
That's funny.
For a reason that Francesa would understand. No, but look, I mean, the thing about Mike Francesa and Dog, same thing. That show, one of the things that kind of came around for him was the way the internet era changed everything, right? And things that Mike Francesa could say midday, halfway through his show in 1997 about some hot take he's thinking it's going to happen in this league or that sport, whatever. It's not going to come around on him 6 months later when he said, "I never said that." Oh, I know, it's not what I said, or I didn't say it that way. Well, actually, Mike, we have the
impression now.
Whatever. And then we have the clip of him having said exactly that.
We had that website, that guy Chris.
And in a way, it kind of gave some more air to his and some more oxygen to his whole brand and stuff like that.
But it's bad PR, which kind of got me
annoyed. It made him a little bit of a clown, which he's not, but it kind of turned him into that.
It killed him. I mean, they got him on tape going, "There's no way Patrick Ewing coaches Georgetown," and the next day, we want to welcome Patrick Ewing as the new coach. But it happened all the time. I mean, almost every day, this guy Chris, and look, when Mike's on the air for 5.5 hours,
that's what I was going to say.
You're going to make a mistake.
When you're talking for 6 hours every day a week in the New York market, you are going to make a mistake.
I mean, you don't ever do that, which is nice, but you
I
don't
never
ever
make
that
mistakes.
mistake.
That's why I'm at a different level.
Right.
I'm serious.
Yeah.
But on a serious note, when I did sports, I didn't care. Like, I made $1 million. I didn't care. And a guy like Mike cares because Mike was known as an insider. I think people just have to come to the realization that when it comes to sports, talk radio for me, have an opinion. That's it.
Right.
You could be wrong. You could be dead wrong. For example, you got to re-sign Pete Alonso. I've been on this show with you guys now for 2 months. I can't believe the amount of criticism. I don't want to hear about his .212 batting average. I don't care. The guy is a home run RBI machine. You need those guys in baseball to win games. That's the bottom line. Not everybody's going to hit 330. So I would go on the air in the band today and say, and I'd argue with Brandon and Sal because they disagree, I don't care about his average. There are guys that are meant to be power hitters that don't hit for average. Like, he's one of those guys. He's great at it. You got to re-sign him. And it'll turn into 40 minutes of a back and forth. Right. That's what sports fans want. I can't stand it, so I walked away from sports, but that is what sports is about. Let Mike and Chris yell and scream about the Yankees, the Giants, or this and the that. Yeah. Whether you get it right or wrong, honestly, who cares?
Yeah, it's true. And I mean, speaking of stuff I can't stand, Pete Alonso just loves to disappear for 3 or 4 weeks. He loves it. It's his favorite thing to do. But you do have to re-sign him. Hold your nose.
But 2 weeks ago, you said no. You want to talk about? How about I make a Twitter account of this podcast, and I'll go back and clip you every time you make a mistake because 2 weeks ago you said you can't sign Pete Alonso. You cannot re-sign Pete Alonso.
And now you want to really say it definitively? I mean, I think that you have to get him on a team-friendly deal. If he's going to sign,
you're not going to get him a team-friendly deal. He's going to get a bag.
This Freddie Freeman contract, then I think you have to let him sign it somewhere else. I do feel that. Freddie Freeman's a guy who plays Gold Glove level defense. He hits for not as much power. I get it, but he's a 300 hitter. He's
a better player. Freddie's a better player.
All
I
around.
agree.
And it's around the same time in terms of age when they're signing that contract. So I mean, I figured that Alonso. Now look, if they're going to hold up Steve Cohen for an extra premium and it ends up being pretty similar, I guess whatever. You got to re-sign him. Obviously, he's a guy who's like a perfect 5 hitter in any given lineup. Alonso, he loves to disappear for months at a time.
Your best hitter hits third.
I mean, I don't know what he's talking about, Alonso hitting 5th, because this guy doesn't realize that baseball is down catastrophically offensively right now. Here's a good stat for you, and then we'll wrap up after this. The MLB hitters are collectively hitting this year 237. That was entering this week, coming into Monday. If they were to end the season hitting 237, that would be the second worst mark in MLB history. We're talking about offense being down catastrophically, yet all you want is 5 hitters to hit 300. Unfortunately, that's not the case, man. It's not all chocolates and roses in this world. Nobody's going to hit 300 anymore. There's only 20 guys in the league hitting 300.
250 is not that much to ask.
He's a career 260 hitter, and now we're getting to that Brandon and Sal stuff, and Sid throws up, he turns us off.
If I'm going to argue about something, it better be Trump and Biden or the Israel-Hamas war, not whether or not Pete Alonso can hit 250.
Crying Carlisle, that's what we like to call him because he's crying.
We'll wrap up here with the Yankees quickly. We won't even get into that generic content because we kind of went long. We'll wrap up with the Yankees. Yankees first place, 25-13. They go for the sweep over Houston. I know we talk about this every week, and I don't even really know what to say every week, so this is when I agree with you. But, what do you say about the Yankees? I guess, is it looking ahead yet, or is it just...
it's one sentence. 25-13 is great. It was exciting to see all three big guns home with the same game yesterday. Soto, Judge, and Stanton. They're a very good baseball team. They could be great. They score a lot of runs. Again, I said the same thing last week. I'll say it again. You played 38 baseball games. 38. I look at 4. 4 out of 38. Those 4 were against the one team people think are better than you, the Baltimore Orioles. And you beat them once. So it's great that you've been winning all they beat. Houston is not the same this year. I don't know why, but they're not the same. You show me a team that's 28-13, that's 3-1 or 4-0 against Baltimore. I'm going, hey, but the one team that you got to worry about, it ain't Toronto, it ain't Tampa Bay, it ain't Boston. Baltimore beat you 3 out of 4. That's what I'm worried about if I'm a Yankee fan.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Yankees, given that the playoffs are an extreme likelihood at this point and we're kind of almost a given in terms of going into the season, what the expectations were, I still think you're looking for that second guy to emerge as a front-end starter that's going to pair with Cole during a playoff series, right? So, like, is it going to be Rodon? You know what I mean? Is somebody like a Nestor Cortez going to recapture it? That type of thing. Who's the number 2 guy that in a big-time DS or ALCS or whatever it may be, get to the World Series, who's that number 2 once Cole comes back? Now he's throwing, he's getting back to mound work, stuff like that. So I think that's the biggest development for the next couple of months.
I don't agree with you much, but I actually think you're spot on there. I think the Yankees lack that, like, second or third.
I'd be careful with lack. Garrett Cole hasn't thrown one pitch in a game yet this year, and they're 12 games over 500. So be careful with lacking. They're also, by the way, last I checked, top 6 in ERA in baseball.
Everyone's pitching well, though.
Top 6 ERA in baseball. Your ace hasn't pitched. You're 12 games over 500. I would say that you're both being a little tough on the Yanks. You're right. You need that 2-starter. Heck, you need a 3-starter. There's no question. You want to see consistency out of somebody else besides your ace. But the numbers are there. Your wins are there. And Cole hasn't pitched yet. That's a good sign for the Yankees.
All right, last question.
I just want to quickly say, in terms of baseball, just really quick, in terms of how Sid, one of my favorite things he says, as you know, is I'm begging you to stop.
I'm begging you.
I wish Nike, I'd like to tell them, I'm begging you to stop with these City Connect uniforms because they're awful.
I agree with that.
I mean, they are just so bad, so generic. They look like a movie about sports where they use, like, it says Detroit across. It's like, oh, my God, these are so bad. Anyway,
I'm on board with you on that one. I like that.
Do you like the Mets? Because well, your man's Gary was like, this is the nicest jersey I've ever seen.
I like the fact that they use the 7-line purple. I think that's kind of cool. That's the only thing that the Nike Connect uniforms have done interesting is use different colors, like the Boston yellow and stuff like that. But no, Nike, begging you to stop.
I do have 4 tickets to Sunday's Mother's Day game against the Braves, but I can't go. So it's Mother's Day.
Well,
Mom doesn't want to go.
There we go.
So she stopped out in the Mets when Felix Millan retired.
That's going back.
That's going back.
All right. Well, boys, appreciate it. It's always fun and always good to catch up with the boys, even if it's just screaming and shouting.
Well, what are we going to do when the Rangers and Knicks are out of the playoffs?
What are we going to do?
We're going to
a lot of baseball and get ready for, I guess, preseason football.
And that's the problem with it. I mean, as you mentioned with sports radio, because I'm not the type of guy that could just bash my head against the wall talking about the Mets and Yankees.
There is nothing worse than the All-Star break in July doing FAN.
Oh, dude.
Now, they want you to go on the air the next day and talk about the home run hitting contest.
Speaking of Sal Licata, when I was at WOR, I would produce those shows when he would fill in for Sports Talk during the All-Star break, and it was always like, oh, man, this is...
That's why none of those guys ever work. The big guns never work in July. Rough month for Sports Talk.
Yep.
All right, well, that's a perfect time to wrap it up. Sid, thank you. James, thank you. We will see you next Tuesday for another episode. Once again, 77 WABC Sports Live.